Hello, Hockey World. Today is December 13th, Tuesday, 2022.
I'm a Jello, Michael.
Kevin Allen.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday to tell you on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And my wife brought me this hat back from her trip to Germany, so I had to wear it because I like it. And it's festive. So don't make fun of me. Anyway, that's that. But let's start. There's a couple things to talk about today. First of all, Board of Governors meeting going on right now. All the governors are together.
Yeah, in cold, inhospitable Florida.
Yeah, terrible place to go. This is a fun one to cover. Kevin, have you gone down? You've gone down this one at some point, right?
Oh, I covered it for about 25 years in a row.
Yeah.
So I love that, and I love the Breakers is just the place to go. It's a historic old hotel right on the ocean. That's just a cool thing, and a lot of important things have happened down there at the Board of Governors meetings. And today there was a little bit of startling news.
Yeah, what is it? What happened?
Well, we have to take it in context. We have to take it in context because in October, either Gary Bettman or Bill Daly came out and said,
Bill Daly came out.
Yeah, the way it was looking, the projections were that there would probably be a greater increase in the salary cap than was expected. It was structured to be $1 million each for the first 3 years after the shortened season to make up the money that the owners had paid out to equal the escrow balance.
Right.
Well, Gary Bettman comes out today and says the NHL is projecting that $70 million still remains in escrow balance at the end of the season, which means that next year, more than likely, it's going to stay at the $1 million increase. Now, he's not saying that for sure, but the projection is, Kev, is that that's where it's going to go. And
but I think there's more to it than that. What he didn't say is whether or not there'd be any negotiations over that.
Right.
Which I think is the key, to all of this. And it was actually Gary Bettman who said that he thought it was going to be $4 million. And today, and NHL.com, which is certainly an arm of the league, Bill Daly was quoted as saying that it's only been several weeks since that happened, and he was quoted as saying that the projections were going to be very similar. Apparently, they weren't, which leads me to believe that there are going to be some sort of negotiations. And I think everybody, both sides, understand that it's been difficult for teams. So I would assume that there will be, and maybe I'm assuming wrong, but I would assume there'll be some talks about how we can kind of make this work so that teams can get some relief, and it's in the best interest of the players certainly to have more room as well. So I say let's, like the Aaron Judge contract negotiations, let's see what develops over time.
It does feel like a little bit like the NHL just doesn't, and businesses, right? They just don't give anything without trying to get something back, right?
Yeah, I mean both sides do that, but more importantly, like if it doesn't happen this year, I mean it'll be a larger increase in 24,
right,
25. So because I remember some people were speculating that if you waited till then, you might see $7 or $8 million increase. So,
right, it might go up to 90. I'm looking at Cap Friendly, and I know Cap Friendly isn't exactly to the penny that the way the NHL projects, but it gives us a bit of a sort of a way of tracking things. And right now, half the league is in LTIR. Half.
Right.
So
more importantly, there's 7 more teams that are under $1 million. So it's 22 of the 32 teams that are essentially capped out.
Right.
And I think that's why it makes sense for them to at least come to some sort of agreement for some, even if it's like $4 million relief isn't all that great, to be honest, but it would help. So
here's the thing. I mean, like about this is like, there are teams I think that are already making moves and under the presumption that it was going up. So I think there's already things that have happened, right? That even though they probably shouldn't have been, but there were. I think that's already been going on.
Well, I mean, Tampa signed all those 8-year deals, but they signed them this year in the current construct. So, I mean, I think they would have, I'm sure that any increase of anything for them would be welcome news next year. But, I mean, they don't have many unrestricted free agents right now, but I do know that a team like Toronto, it's not critical for next year because they have a lot of UFAs. They have a lot of money coming off and they could sign players on short-term deals. But the following year, when Austin Matthews and Nylander are free agents, the league, there better be a big increase or they're going to probably lose Nylander in free agency. That's why I've continued to say that they should trade Nylander before they lose him, but maybe that's not the case.
Yeah. I mean, well, I don't think there, I can't say for sure there hasn't been any moves, but it was only, I think it was 6 or 7 weeks ago that Bettman said it was going up. Yeah. So not much has really happened since then.
Right.
But even though that's what he said it, there was a feeling throughout the league, before that it was going up. Like that was, even though that was first publicly time it came out, that was already
then that's on them. If you're reacting to your gut feeling as opposed
to it is on that. And the weird thing about this is we're talking about the people like, those people who are doing it are also the same people who are saying that, if anyone made that move, they're the same people in a way because they're saying that it won't go up, right? So it's a strange situation that way because you're talking about the owners here not raising it, and if the owners were making those moves already, then
that's the whole thing. The general managers, they need to know, and they need to know before the deadline. I mean, they're not going to get like a definite, well, the cap is going to be this, but they'll get an indication from the league that we think it's going to be this, and you can make moves accordingly. Yeah. I mean, right now, I look at Cap Friendly, and there are 3 teams, Anaheim, Buffalo, and Arizona, who have over $20 million in cap space.
Right.
Kevin Adams, Bill Armstrong, and Pat Verbeek in Anaheim, they could demand a king's ransom, even on rental deals, even like taking contracts on just for the end of the year. They could, based on what's going on right now. I don't know if they're going to, Kev, but they should. If I was them, I was the ownership, I'd say go ahead and do it because you can make a ton of moves and get a ton of draft picks or prospects, and those teams could use them.
But that's real money, though, Mike.
I know.
I mean, it's real money, and these teams are not doing well, because they're not drawing because they're really poor teams. So, I mean, we just automatically assume that an owner will want to lose millions of dollars to get a competitive advantage, but some of them are not. In fact, I would say most of them are not.
Well, it's okay. The one thing is it's prorated. So, say for example, these teams take on, 2 or 3 players each take on $10 million in salary. Well, it's only a quarter of that, so it's for me, $2.5 million is a lot of money, obviously. But you make an investment of that on players that you're getting, you're taking from other teams. It depends on what you're getting back. It depends on if you're getting like a first round pick or you're getting a really good prospect. And if that's the case, that you're investing in your future by doing that. If you're not getting anything other than a couple draft picks, then what the hell is the point?
Yeah, the problem is they're not trying to move rentals. They're trying to move players with the term on them. So you're dealing with this forever, and it's real dollars over, like we've talked about, Erik Karlsson. That's 4 years at $11 million, or even half would be, $5 million, 5.5. So, I mean, I just don't, I just think we have to be careful thinking, well, all these teams should just do that, and, even at the bottom of the first round, there's no guarantee of getting a player. And the first round is only, it's up to 70%, which is really high. So 3 times out of 10, or in the case of a round, that's 9 players. 9 players out of the first round don't make it. And so you're paying, $2.5 million for a first round pick or whatever. And, you may not get anything out of it. There's a 30% chance you won't. So,
yeah. All right. So other news out of the Board of Governors, Bettman continuing to say that he has no interest at all in the play-in concept, which, and he's basically adding that, you're trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist. right?
And that's right. And that's okay. And he is never going to sign off on this. Never. He's never going to change. Never. So I mean, one of the very few things that I'll be glad about when Gary Bettman retires is that maybe Bill Daly will be open to this, because there is no problem here. This is an opportunity to make more money. You had a play-in. You had a best of 3. Why not? I don't get it. It's not bastardizing the league to have a play-in. I don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's fascinating to me because I completely agree with you, Mike. Like, that I've beat the drum for this for a long time. Yeah. In baseball, that play-in is one of the most exciting things. And the great irony of this, and I actually saw someone else write about this too, and he was really as amused about it as I am, is that what has Gary Bettman been accused of most of his 30 years he's been the commissioner? That is, he goes for the money. It's about the money. Right. He's trying to get more money for the owners. And in this case, Bettman believes it's just wrong to keep adding playoff teams, despite the fact, as Mike pointed out, you can make millions. So now the one time when he kind of takes an almost altruistic perspective about it, he's criticized again because he didn't go chase the money. But Mike's right on this. Like, you would make so much money. Like, you could pretty much, if you had 7 versus 8, even if it was just just to go 7 versus 8, you'd have these games. You could pretty much charge whatever you wanted for tickets for that single game. And some people say, well, it'd have to be 2 out of 3. I would just make it 1 game. And then people say, well, then the entire season is null and void because it comes down to 1 game. And I say, sometimes that it comes down to 1 game in game 82. So is that season null and void because it came down to the final game after you played 81 other games? Well, in this case, you're going to play 82 other games and you're going to have 1 more, and it's going to come down to that. Like, what's the difference? Like, what's
you could do a round like a 7 versus 10, 8 versus 9 round like the NBA does. I mean, it hasn't been, the NFL has expanded their playoffs. The NBA's added in a play-in game. Major League Baseball has increased their playoffs. The league has increased. It had 16 teams in the playoffs when the league was 21 teams, which was 80% of the league. Now it's 32, and you're sticking with 16. I don't get it. You know what it is, Kev? Whenever Gary Bettman, digs his heels in on a certain thing, you can't knock him off it. This is his Arizona. This is another, like, I'm not going to move that team no matter what, even though it would be profitable.
You're right. I mean, you feel strongly about this. I actually had a very lengthy conversation with him about this, and he just feels if you start that you water down the playoffs.
Yeah.
He said the playoffs are great. He said, our playoffs are the envy of other leagues just because, we have first round upsets, we have so much parity in the league. And he said, if we start monkeying with it and adding in that, he thinks it waters it down. And why, as he said today, why, if it's not broke, why do we want to try to fix it? And I mean, we know the argument that we're not trying to fix it. We're trying to enhance it. But that, that's how he sees it. And as I said, it's a strange juxtaposition given that he has always worked hard to increase revenue, and seems like a no-brainer to do this, but he believes really strongly in this, and as Mike pointed out, I don't think he's going to change. And Gary Bettman's going to be around for a while. He's 70 years old, but he is not even close to thinking about retirement. So I would think that at a minimum he'll go to age 75.
I want to take his side on this. Honestly, I do. I want to just no. I just I mean, the NHL has more teams percentage wise than any other league, right? Any professional league. Is that true? 50%. I mean, does the NBA have more than 50% of the teams?
No, the NBA is now at 20.
Okay,
because of the play-in.
All right, so they have a bigger percentage. And for years they definitely hated the fact that we had 16 teams and there were only 21. I mean, I remember talking to the NHL. They just hated that fact. They did feel like the regular season was minimized. They do feel like that's not the case now. they do like the hoopla of the first round of the playoffs being the playoffs starting now. Like, these are the playoffs. They've begun now. And that first round of the playoffs is, like, in my opinion, that and maybe the first couple weeks of the NCAA tournament are my two favorite times a year. Like, where you get all that stuff going on. Let me finish for a second.
Well, let me just ask a question and retort, because I'll let you finish. But how does a play-in round take away from that?
Well, because it does minimize, like, that all 16 teams are starting the playoffs right now. Like, this is what's happening. All the best team and the worst team are all starting right now. No one's sitting around waiting. Like, first of all, this year we saw baseball, right? We saw the Phillies. The Phillies were a perfect example of what it can happen with the play-in game, right? Like, the Phillies play in, they win, they go all the way to the World Series. That's exciting. But there were teams who were, being here in Philadelphia, there were teams who were complaining, that those other teams had those days off or whatever. You see all this stuff. And all this, and I think I think that's ridiculous. I do, especially in baseball. But the fact that there is something to the NHL shifts into playoff mode. They've got their thing on their website, which they love, which is why we don't. I'm not where I would change. I do think they 1 through 8 seeding would be better. I do agree with that. But I don't think 16. I don't think more than 16 teams are necessary.
Well, that argument is sort of shot down when, if you use the Major League Baseball example, is the team that won the World Series and beat the Phillies was a team that got the bye and got the week off that they could rest their pitching staff and get them in line so they could win. There's a benefit. If you're having 14 teams or 14 teams in the Eastern and Western Conference getting off 4 or 5 days before the playoffs start for them to rest and sort of get things in line after an 82-game schedule, while the 7, 8, 9, and 10 are beating the crap out of each other to get into the playoffs. I don't see how that's a negative.
Mike, don't you think that 7, 8, 9, and 10, okay, the most interesting upsets we have are 8 versus 1, 7 versus 2, right?
Which don't happen very often, but yeah, they happen.
They don't happen very often, but when they do happen, those are great. I mean, by forcing those teams to play in, that chance decreases a lot. Because now those teams are tired going against the top teams in the league.
Agreed. And there should be a benefit for a team playing 82 games and being like the Florida Panthers and winning the President's Trophy. There should be a benefit for them finishing at the top of the conferences. You have everybody equal, and that 8th place team, the LA Kings, beat the Vancouver Canucks, or the Montreal Canadiens beat the Toronto Maple Leafs. Those teams that fight through 82 games and have the best record, they should have an advantage.
But I mean, you're talking about if you're gonna do one game playoff, right? If you're gonna do 1 game playoff, that's
for those 7, 8, 9, 10 for those two.
But if it's a best of 3,
right?
Then you're talking about a week off for teams.
Yes.
Yeah. Which I don't like that momentum shift at all. Like, I think a best of 1 does kind of minimize the regular season a little bit, because it's like then I can see his argument here. I really can.
Yeah, he's never made that argument with me, but I don't buy that just for the reasons that I articulated before, because it oftentimes comes down to the final game or two of what's going on, and you're looking at the permutations, and and then the argument, of course, against that is don't put yourself in that position. You don't want to be in a position to have to play a single game. But I wouldn't spread it out. I don't like the week off before the start of the 16 teams. I would just make it a single game, and I think it would be exciting as heck. And you can complain about it all you want, but you've put yourself into that position by finishing either 8th or 9th, and usually it's the 8th. And I don't know that I wouldn't get into a mini tournament and expand it to 20 teams. I just wouldn't do that. I would want to see how it works with one team, but I would do that. I would throw that in there, and I think adding multiple series, I think, would extend it too much. But a single game.
Yeah, and if you do that, Kev, if you most of the time the regular season ends on a Sunday and the start on a Wednesday. Then you could do 1 round on Monday, 1 round on Tuesday, and then the playoffs start.
Yeah, that's right. No Thursday, you delay it 1 day. Thursday, you start the playoffs, and even I don't think it would wear out the teams that had to play the play-in games, because you get in that mode. I mean, we already have a discrepancy, and I've seen people make this argument. When you go into playoffs, you have no idea whether you're going to play 28 games or 21 games or 22 games. And that still will be the case. Now you'll have an opportunity. Perhaps you'll play 29 games, but I would guess it's not going to happen very often that you'll have to play 29 games. I would like to see it, but I don't think it's going to happen. Gary Bettman is, as Mike said, dug in about it. And at least, you can give him some credit. This is a principled thing for him. And because, as I said, I think it's a no-brainer in terms of enhancing revenue. Could you imagine? And I've said this before. I wouldn't sell these television rights for this to any of the existing rights holders.
No,
I'd put it out to anybody else that would want it and say, this is going to be separate. This will be all yours. This is the play-in games. We're going to charge you a lot of money for them, but you'll get these, and you'll have exclusive rights to it. So
that's what Major League Baseball did with it. Well, and they sold it to TBS. And they made a ton on it. So that would be
or even do it. The NHL should do it themselves. NHL Network. Sell the ads. Make more money on it. I think it would really be incredible. And I like the idea. And people will complain about it because people don't like the idea of they'll use it diminishes the value of the regular season, but. But again, I want to just make that point. Is it diminished when it comes down to the 82nd game? Because now it's just going to come down to the 83rd game. That's all.
Right.
So
that's all it's going to be. And like a lot of times we are like a 1 point or 2 point difference at the end of the season.
Yeah. And, we'll see. I mean, I think when you can make a legitimate argument. If it comes down and we find out that in the first two, the 9th place team was 10 points behind the 8th place team. Well, maybe that's a legitimate complaint, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to be right on top of each other.
Pretty close. It's usually 3 points or so, and 3 points is probably, the biggest
and expanding the playoff race act brings more teams into the race. It's all it does is like now teams are going to be bad. It may decrease teams dumping at the deadline because the playoff pools expanded and they may still have a chance to sneak in.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's going to create revenue beyond the game because the team that's in 9th place now where people aren't going to the games because they've given up. Well, they're going to be in now. That maybe that team in 10th place that's fighting with the 9th place team. Like maybe their people are going to go to the game.
I agree with that, and it becomes a race for 7th. Like 7th becomes a big too, like to get to that spot, you don't have to play that game.
Right, race for 6 because 6 would be guaranteed, and then 7 would have to play the play-in game. So
to me, the only way I accept this is Kevin's way of 1 game per conference, 8 versus 9.
Yeah. I don't know why people. I don't know why we got to play off 7 and 8. I would just play off 8.
Like 7 versus 10 and 8 versus 9. I don't like
it. Just take the. Let's just try it. Let's just bring in the 8th place. You finish 8th in your conference. If you have the worst record, you got to play into the
way the NBA does it, Kev. I think 9 plays 10, and then the winner of that plays 8. So you have a play-in. So there's one play-in game to get to the
other play-in game.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that right away. I'd want to see how it works with just the team that just missed.
Right.
They just missed bowl. Would be where what's the challenge match is really what it is. So
I mean, I wouldn't say that this is impossible if this ever happens. I mean, I think that although Gary Bettman's dug his feet in, I don't think it's impossible.
I don't think it'll happen in his commissionership, but you can't be the commissioner forever. So at some point he will have to retire, and I don't. Like I said, I think they're going to let him go out in his own accord because he's still sharp, and the league is still, at least in the eyes of the estimation of the owners, is still thriving under his stewardship.
The only thing I've ever fought with him about that he's absolutely totally bullish about, and I've had conversations with him about this before, is my concept of 3 points for a regulation win. I
don't think that's ever happening either.
Never going to happen.
Yeah, but that's not Bettman. There's a lot of people in the league.
A lot of people feel that way too, but I don't know that I think Daly might be okay with it. From talking to different people, but I don't know. That to me is, but that and because their concept is that teams will run away with it then, right? And I don't think that's the case, but that's what they say. And, anyway.
So, Act, the last night, the best game on the schedule sort of interwoven into the rumor that put the Rangers and the Devils at MSG, and I watched a lot of this game. And the Devils are just rocking right now. And they're 21-5-2. I do think though that the Rangers, they came back twice in this game. They won overtime. After the Devils dominated the overtime in terms of puck possession. And Kev, this is the thing that I have a problem with. And I could see this coming a mile away. When 3-on-3 started in overtime, it was exciting. It was fantastic. It was back and forth. Now it's almost whoever wins the opening faceoff, they cycle the puck, they shoot it out of the zone, they pass it to their own goaltender just to keep possession. And most of the time, the team that gets the opening faceoff wins the game, or there's very few instances where it goes back and forth and back. It's been coached to death, and now it sucks.
You had me until the end. I completely agree with you. It's not nearly as exciting as it was before. It's funny. I just did a story on this, and I ended up talking. The Red Wings have one of the worst overtime records on this. We asked Derek Lalonde if what he thought about it. And he goes, well, I really dislike it right now because we're not any good at it. And but my question to him, and he actually said that there's something to my question. Is it really a problem, or is the randomness of overtime, play such a role? Like, for example, the Toronto Maple Leafs should be very good in extra time. They have a great offensive team, but they're not. They've given up. They've had 6 overtime shootout losses as well. Carolina Hurricanes should be terrific in extra time or shootouts. They're not. They've had 6 overtime losses. And if you look, some of the better teams, so there is some randomness that gets in the way of it. And I think the coaches have tried to take the randomness out of it by managing the overtime. That's the way Malone called it. And the other day when I was watching in Dallas, the Red Wings got the puck and they held on to it for 2.5 minutes. It reminded me of the John Wooden era when they would take the air out of the basketball and people would boo. Well, because Dallas fans booed because the Red Wings, kept passing the puck as Mike said, back. They took it out of the zone, they regrouped, they passed it, and there was no shots. Right. And then finally, when they finally lost the puck, Dylan Larkin was on the ice too much, made a mistake, didn't complete his pass. It was kind of a suicide pass. And then the guy got the puck and he went, it was 2-on-1 Niels Lundqvist and he scored. And, when I asked Lalonde, did you analyze that as a mistake, or, did you just accept that there's kind of some randomness? He goes, yeah, we see it as a big mistake. And he said, you can kind of manage that game, but I don't know. Like, I think there's just too much randomness in it to, you're better off. Like the Red Wings are playing that very conservative style. They were good in overtime last year when they just run and gun.
Well, the thing is, it's like it is reminiscent of like the Dean Smith 4 corners basketball back in the 80s. And like you said, the Wooden UCLA stuff. But no, like Toronto was 2-6 in overtime. They won against Calgary on Saturday night, and they went counterintuitive because they've been putting out Matthews and Nylander or Tavares and Marner and their best offensive defensemen, and they've been losing. And then on Saturday, what did they do? They put out 2 defensemen and David Kampf, their best faceoff guy, and 3 seconds into overtime, Jonathan Huberdeau accidentally high sticks Rasmus Sandin and they get a power play and they win. If it goes 3-on-3, they're a rush team. They're not their puck possession when it's 5-on-5, but apparently 3-on-3 doesn't work. It's so random. And really, they were booing at MSG last night when New Jersey had the puck for 2 minutes in the zone and didn't shoot.
No shots. I know. They're afraid to shoot because if you miss, it goes the other way.
It's all about counter. It's all about counterattacks. 3-on-3 overtime. Completely about counterattacks. It's crazy. And then sometimes it looks like box lacrosse, like to me, like it looks like, they just pass it back to somebody who's like standing there in his own zone, waiting for everybody to change, and all that stuff. It's just, there are moments when it is crazy.
Well,
like that.
I also thought that Lalone made a really good point. While Detroit had all the possession in the world, and they were just controlling the puck and skating all the while, he pointed out that Jamie Benn, who was on the ice for the entire time, stood in the middle of the ice and just, was stationed there so that they really couldn't kind of break in, like, sort of playing a free safety where he didn't panic, totally poised, and just wait it out. Like, they've coached this now where, they've sort of figured out, that your gap is wide. You just make sure you can cover the guys coming in. It's really remarkable. So
and Kev, I think it was last week you said, I think for the first time this year, like the overall goals against was over 3. In the league. Well, last night I think we regressed back to 1995 because other than that Rangers Devils game, which was 4-3, every game there was 5 other games. All of them were cumulative, were 3 goals or under. So it was like it was Penguins 2-1, Canadians 2-1, Senators 3-0, Wild 2-1, Blues 1-0.
Yeah,
it
weird
was
night.
Peterborough.
I'm just gonna look down and see if we've gotten below. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll throw something out there like along these lines, and it's not hockey related. First, it is hockey. It's hockey related only, and I don't want to stay on this for a long time, but. I want to say that the 3-on-3 is better than just a shootout, correct? And
I hate the shootout. I hate.
When I go to this, I want to talk about the World Cup of Soccer for just a second.
Okay.
Because because I'm watching there were like 2 incredible games on one day last week. Like that, you had a chance watch it.
Croatia, Brazil, and Argentina. Yeah.
Argentina and the Netherlands, right? And they all go to penalty kicks at the end, right?
Yeah.
And then so at the end of for those who don't know, at the end of soccer they have like this 10-minute overtime type thing, I guess it is, where they just
30 minutes.
30 minutes. They just play another 30 minutes, and it's not about who scores first or anything. That's just another 30 minutes. Right. There's not a golden goal in soccer, so to speak. And as I'm watching this thing, I'm just thinking to myself, man, wouldn't this be better instead of going to these penalty kicks if these guys were playing 7v7? Like if they played a 7v7. 30-minute overtime golden goal. That would just the skill that these guys have.
Mm-hmm.
And so why aren't they taking a cue from hockey?
But the thing
why?
Yeah, because we don't go to 4 and 4 overtime in the playoffs. We don't. Yeah,
but they don't do a shootouts. Go ahead, Kevin. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, you and I have talked about this before, so we know what our position is.
Yeah.
The World Cup of Soccer, or soccer in general, or football as it's known in Europe, is such an enormous game compared to our little sport in hockey.
Oh yeah,
and their tradition of penalties is to them what our Stanley Cup play into the night overtimes are. Like they would know, like I've had discussions with them about this, and again, I'll bring up Igor Larionov because I've talked to him a lot about this.
Yeah.
Like he thinks that we shouldn't do overtime in the NHL like we do well into the night, because he said then it just becomes a matter of attrition and fatigue.
Right.
And he said if you want to settle it, you settle it the way we settle the World Cup, with pure skill. And he said, have you ever witnessed, penalties and what it does to a stadium of 50-some thousand people in soccer when advancing is on the line? He said the tension is like nothing you will ever know.
I guess.
Were you in Nagano for the Canada Czech in 98?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, okay, that's the only example that I can point to in terms of like the drama of Hasek versus the Canadians, and did they choose Gretzky or not Gretzky? I mean, all that. Okay, I get that, but I just don't think that that's the North American game. I think part of the romance is going to triple overtime or quadruple.
Yeah, I mean that. But my only point on all this is that's why they wouldn't even consider that. Like I wouldn't, just out of respect to their game and the magnitude of their game, I would never suggest that to a.
Right. That's an interesting perspective. Yeah, I mean, I get that, and I've had this discussion with soccer people, and I've heard the same kind of thing we've talked about before, Chief, like you said. But I just want to see it. Like I want to see like a 7v7.
Yeah.
I just think that would just be I mean, it just to me, the interesting thing about they've decided that they take what is basically a really intensely physical game and solve it in a mental showdown.
Yeah.
It's a you know what I mean? It's a mental showdown. The penalty kicks are mental. It's all mental. From the goalie's perspective, it's guessing, right? Like, although I love this Croatian goalie. He is like,
the 6'8" guy.
Yeah, I don't know if he's 6'8". I don't think he's 6. Is he a 6'8"? I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's.
Well, most of those
the Netherlands goalie was 6'8".
Netherlands goalie, yeah, but the Croatian goalie. If you want to see the highlights of his saves against Brazil, just like, I mean, he's like the Tim Thomas of soccer goalies. Like, he's like the weirdest positioning style and everything like that, but making these, like, he's making flat out split kick saves, like strange, like things you just never see.
Well, the Argentinian goalie made 2 saves on consecutive penalty kicks. That one, and if you want to talk, and we'll get off soccer here in a second. But if you want to talk about nerves and how nerves undo players in any sport, Harry Kane choking in the penalty kick late in regulation against France. I mean, all of England. I have friends over in England. They were ready to commit harikiri when that happened. I mean, it was just that was a disaster. So I get it.
No, I know. And Karen, I was texting Karen, who's in our writers in the chat room. I was texting her during those penalty kicks, actually, because I was watching it, and I knew she was watching it. She's a huge soccer fan, and played soccer too. And it's just like, I grew up with my daughter was a goalie, and I mean, there's no reason I would hate. There's nobody who hates penalty kicks more than the parent of a goalie, okay, in soccer, because there's absolutely. There's nothing she can do about it at all. Like, she has to take her chances. My daughter actually wrote her college entrance essay on the concept of, diving left, diving right, or just standing still, and how that relates to all of life, which is really an interesting essay. But it's like, that is like, I thought that was very cool, and it's true, because the thought process of that is so intense.
Well, there's analytics on that now.
I'm sure there are.
Yeah.
Analytics on everything.
Yeah, analytics on diving left, diving right, and standing in the middle. Yeah.
Anyway, that's just an aside. But I want to get into hockey rumors. Here for a second.
So the Devils Rangers game, that was sort of central to what you were talking about.
Yeah. So yesterday we talked a lot about how I've been hearing the Devils, interest in Timo Myers and stuff like that, and how I think that they would spend a lot for him, a lot more than people think. And Russ didn't think he was worth that much. You and I kind of thought he was worth more than I think Russ thought.
I think he's worth a lot.
Yeah, I think they'll get quite a bit for him.
I don't know if there's another forward out there that because Timo Myers is a power forward. Right. I don't know if there's another forward out there, because most Ryan O'Reilly's a center and he's more of a two-way guy. Horvat, who we'll talk about in a minute, is really good. Dylan Larkin is really good. They're all centers, but I don't know if there's not many power wingers. Maybe Bertuzzi.
For sure. Yeah. And I think that they'll get a lot for Meyer, because the other thing about him is his number of shots. Like, he's always among the league leaders, and you want opportunities to score, and he provides them because he gets the puck on the net.
Right. So here's the rumor about surrounding Patrick Kane, because I talked to somebody today in Jersey, and that the Jersey Devils definitely have a big interest in Patrick Kane, and the rumor names going back would be Alex Holtz, who we talked about yesterday.
Yeah.
A first round pick, and Severson for Patrick Kane. And I want to know what you guys thought of that how you would view that trade if it happened.
Go ahead, Kev.
I think it's that's the kind of return that Chicago's going to ask for. And,
right.
I could only see the Devils doing that if they believe, that they actually have a shot to do well in the postseason. And number two is they're less excited about Holtz than other teams are, because that's he was considered the best, or at least one of the top 2 or 3 best scorers from that draft. So
now obviously we're factoring in that Chicago's retaining 50%.
Yeah.
Now the only thing is, Russ disagreed that New Jersey would trade Holtz unless it was a player that they could hold on to, and I don't think Patrick Kane is staying in New Jersey, although you never know. I mean, the team is up and coming, and they've got a lot of good young players. The only problem I have with that potential deal, and maybe it's not that big of a deal because Severson is, even though he's a bottom pairing guy for them, he's playing well for them. Chicago probably, because he's a rental, he's a UFA. They probably would flip him to get more draft picks and prospects. So, I mean, in that sense, it makes sense. I think it's about right for Kane. I think it's prospect, player, and first round pick.
They would get more than that anywhere else?
No, I don't. I mean, you're talking about a top 10 pick who's a really good young player in Holtz, a top 4 defenseman on most teams in Severson, and a number 1. I don't see anybody topping that. Kev, do you?
Yeah, well, the problem is that first round pick is going to be 30th or 31st. So
it's a second round pick.
That's like a second. So I mean, it'll be interesting to see what the offers are. Like the Rangers can, if they make a run, they could sweeten it with players who are already in the league.
Yes.
Capo.
Yeah.
Hedel or Lafreniere. Well, probably not Lafreniere because.
It won't be Lafreniere. I also don't think it'll be Hedel, but they've got other players.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Capo doesn't have probably the value that Holtz has, right? I mean, like I would say.
No, I think he does act because he played in the playoffs last year and he played well. So I think in a way, and he's, second overall pick. I think his value is maybe on par or a little higher because he has some NHL experience, whereas Holtz does.
Yeah, like he's already in the league. He can play in the league. What you don't know is whether he can score.
Right.
And I think and I do think this could come down to a battle of those two teams because those two teams are, they that's exactly what Chicago wants. They want New Jersey and the Rangers bidding against each other, right? Because those two teams are.
I wouldn't rule out, Edmonton or Colorado or, one of those teams as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree with that.
I wrote about it a little bit today. I do think that Toronto is going to be one of those teams who gets involved in the forward acquisition because the last month or so has maybe convinced them that their defensive depth is not as bad, and guys like Liljegren and Sandin can play larger roles. They may go out and add a depth defenseman, but they may spend most of that LTIR money that they get from Muzzin on a forward because they need a left winger on the line with Tavares and Marner right now, and that could be Meyer, that could be. I don't think it'll be one of the centers, but unless they trade for Ryan O'Reilly and move somebody to the wing. I mean, I think they could be in on one of those forwards if they fit, if they think they're the right fit.
Yeah. I mean, I think they could be too. I think the other thing that I've heard that is interesting about this is New Jersey would do this sooner than the Rangers would, right? So that New Jersey would consider this, a December, which would be next week or so, obviously, or January trade where the Rangers are more like a deadline move, right? So and does that matter to Chicago? I don't really know.
It should because you don't want them to get hurt.
Right. You don't get hurt, right? And you don't have to pay as much money, right?
Well, that was my methodology because I made a bold prediction, Kev, yesterday that I think Chychrun is going to get traded before the trade freeze because he's playing really well right now. Arizona wants to move him, and if they get close to what they've been asking for, I think they would rather move sooner rather than later. And you've got a week before the trade freeze. I think if they get an offer close to it, they're going to pull the trigger on it.
Well, that makes sense, but I don't know where they're at,
right,
in terms of how close they really are. But
I still don't think teams have seen enough to give they want. That's the impression I get. Like they think that he's playing well, but he's not, and he's point a game roughly, which is great. But it's a really small sample still. So it's like
they want to see him play 20 games before.
Make sure he's okay. And I think that's why I think that teams will be patient and wait till after the deadline on that one, after the trade freeze.
After the trade freeze, yeah.
Yeah, finally, I want to play a little game with you guys before we get out of here. In the last,
just one quick thing, and then we. It sounds like the talks have broken off between Horvat and the Canucks. There's been various reports on that, and that more than likely. Now the thing is, if they're in the race, the Canucks might want to hold on to him. But Kev, he is so valuable and he's having such a big year. I just don't think they can. I think you have to avail yourselves of the opportunity to get multiple assets for a guy who, if you can't sign him, is going to walk away for nothing.
Well, yeah, and Pierre LeBrun did report that there's a focus on trading him now. So I think he had some pretty good inside information on that. So and we have been hearing that there's been discussions about him, and they want a lot for him. Now, the attractiveness of Horvat is he's only, and I shouldn't say only, but he's making $5.5 million. So if Vancouver retains some of that, you could squeeze him in almost any salary cap.
Yeah.
And he's having an incredible year, the best year of his career, 20 goals in 28 games. I mean, that's a 50-goal pace. So, he's a very attractive option. But they're going to be looking for the same kind of package. They're going to be looking for that first-round pick, that good prospect, or somebody that a young player they can move into their lineup, and hopefully they'll probably be thinking, well, we need to get someone back so that we can fight for the playoffs.
Yeah, they're still in it. Yeah, they're still only a couple points out. Yeah, I think, and they're in the spot where they can see that Besser and Horvat are probably not returning. So, yeah, they can't, like you say, they got to get something for one of them at some point, I think.
Yeah, I think they should wait to trade Besser. I don't think trading him in the middle of the season.
Yeah,
I think it's problematic. I would wait.
That's the forward version of Chikrin. They can afford to wait until they get their price.
Right.
Years.
Right.
Yeah. More than I mean, although I think there is also a push to to culture change that place. And I think I talked about this a little bit yesterday, Kev, that I was talking to people in Vancouver, and they said that there's almost two different teams. Like there's Pettersson's team, and then there's Horvat's and Besser's team. And it's and there's definitely a divide in the locker room. And Horvat and Besser aren't playing on the top line anymore, and they're not happy about that. So there's a whole bunch of things happening there. That I think that there might just be an attempt to just change the culture. They can't.
Well, I mean, I do understand that. I'm a believer in culture.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I think Besser will look better in the off season. You know what I mean? When teams are trying to enhance their offense, and they start to convince themselves, well, we get them in our system, playing with our guys, with our leaders, he'll be better. And so I think they'll look at both. If they can make any kind of good deal, I see your point of wanting to move them now. But if it's a stretch for them, if there's any doubt about the return on it, I think they'll wait.
Yeah. There seems to be a lot of Colorado rumors when it comes to Horvat, so that's something we'll track and watch over the next few months.
That'd be something. All right, so my new game I'm going to introduce today, and we'll play in the last couple minutes here, is called For Reals, For Steals, or For Feels. Okay, so these are reals, steals, or feels. Okay, so if I tell you I'm going to bring a team, and do you think they're for real? If they're for steals, it means that you think they're stealing this, and they're not honest. They're just a fake team. Or for feels, you just want so much for them to be real that you can't say that they're either.
Okay.
All right, so that's great.
Okay.
And I'm going to start with the Seattle Kraken right off the top. Are they for real, for steals, or for feels, Kevin?
I think they're steals, but it's between steals and feels because I want them to do well. I like Ron Francis.
Yeah.
I want to believe, but when I look at their roster, it doesn't seem like they're a team that is set up to be successful, when the games get tight. So maybe I'm wrong, but
no,
I'm going to say steals.
Yeah. What do you think?
I'll say feels because I think they're the feel good story in terms of being the second year. Like last year they followed the typical expansion model, but this year, they're sort of a Cinderella story, 1/3 into the season, and it'll be worth tracking to see if they can hold on and be competitive for a playoff spot. But I don't really think it's realistic, but I'd like to see it. I have nothing against that organization. They have, Ron Francis is a good guy, and I'd like to see Hackstall have some success, and they have some good players that they've acquired via an expansion draft or trade. So it's something I'll be watching.
I'd say steals. I'm with Kevin on this one. Even though I like the people that are involved there, I just think that they're benefiting from a Western Conference that is with a lot of teams that are struggling. You know, like in the Western Conference, where a lot of teams are battling to get out of their own way. You know, like Edmonton, Calgary, and Vancouver are all sort of battling to get out of their own way right now. The Kings aren't the greatest either. Anaheim is underperforming. Like, you know, to me, there's a lot of teams that are just not quite there, and I think that's why I think they're kind of stealing money right now. All right, so my next team is the Vegas Golden Knights. So, Mike, you want to start with them?
Reals. They're absolutely for real. I mean, now they've started to have a few injuries. Eichel's out for a couple games, but he's been playing well. And Logan Thompson right now, it's him or Beniers leading the way for the Calder. Thompson's been fantastic. I mean, so yeah, they're and you know, they have a starting goaltender who could make the All-Star team, making less than $1 million for that team. You know, surviving with that and Aiden Hill in goal and having everybody reasonably healthy has been a miracle for them.
Yeah, Kevin, what do you think?
Yeah, real plus for me. I think they've been very impressive, and I think they've kind of turned back the clock. They're more like their first tier team, where you know, it's hard to sort of pinpoint exactly why they're so good, because they're just playing so well as a team, and they've got everything seems to be going well. Their defense is better than we expected. Their forward group looks quite cohesive, and their goaltending has just been outstanding. So yeah, I like this team a lot. I think they're the best team in that division.
Okay, good. I think they're for reals as well, and I'm surprised by it. But because I really thought they were just such a disaster last year. I'm just surprised how quickly they could get back on track. But definitely the goaltending has helped. How about the Jersey Devils, Kevin?
Well, at the start of the year, I would have said Steels, but I'm going to say real again. I mean, they've been impressive. I watched. I think they're the fastest team in the league. I think their defense is playing over their head, but it looks sustainable to me. Like when you watch them play, you know, you feel like, yeah, they can sustain this. You remember that no-name defense that got them all the way to the finals several years ago? You know, so the only question to me is their goaltending, but it's held up. I mean, we're a third of the way through the season, so I'm going to say real on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sort of ambivalent. I want to say real because they've been so impressive, but I'm still like, I don't know, you know, can they get through the rest of the regular season with Vitek Vanacek and Akira Schmid? I think they need Blackwood to come back. So I'm sort of between real and Steel here. So I'm right in the middle.
You're either real minus or Steel plus.
Yeah, real minus. That's a good one.
I'm on Steels for this one.
I like that. Real minus.
I'm on Steels for this one because I want them to be successful. They've had so many years where they haven't been successful, and I'm happy for their fans that this is happening. So I really want this to work. I want this to keep going, but I also don't know that it necessarily can keep going. And I think part of the reason, you know, you go to get Kane now is to try to keep it going, because it feels like, even watching that game last night against Rangers, it feels like it's slipping a little bit. And I don't know, like that's, you know, and it's not a big deal, but maybe it is. I don't know. How about those Detroit Red Wings? Now, because Red Wings are out of the playoff spot right now, but with games in hand, you know, percentage wise, they're in the playoffs. So
yeah, I'm going to say Steel just because, you know, they're in a tough division. They've got a good system now. They know what they've got to do to be successful. But you know, the final step is developing the consistency on it, and I think that's been the struggle. They know what to do. Right. They can do it sometimes, but they haven't been able to do it all the way. And you know, they've been overrun by injury. So I just don't know they're going to get there. So I'm going to say Steel.
It was right now playing above their head a little bit.
I'll say Steel's plus. I'm surprised that they are where they are. I think it's they have some good players. The injuries have hurt. They've been getting really great goaltending out of Husso. It's the question is whether they can, hold off Tampa and Florida nipping at their heels for third spot, or if they're going to be battling for a wild card. So, right now I think they're a success story, but it's a third of the way into the season.
Yeah. I think they're for real. I do. I really do. When I watch them play, I just think that you're seeing a lot of young players coming together at the same time. You're seeing like the work of a lot of years of either being carefully putting a team together. And I think the moves that he made this summer, bringing in a couple of veterans, I really, really like them. And I like Uso too. I think they're for real. I think they're going to be in the. I think they're going to be in the playoff battle to the very end. I really do. Boston Bruins. The Bruins now set a record for or tied a record for the most wins in the first 25 games of the season to 21.
I mean,
they're real. I mean, they're real. I mean, and the only doubt anybody had about them was their early season injuries, and that turned out to be, I don't want to say exaggerated, but their projections of how long they were going to be out didn't turn out to be accurate. And now that they have everyone back, the addition of Krejci, Taylor Hall has, been a different player. All of a sudden, everybody seems happy. Their defense with McAvoy and Lindholm, these are guys that can play.
Yeah.
And their goaltending has been terrific. So,
they've got 2 number 1 defensemen, and they have the luxury of playing Taylor Hall, who's playing really well, playing him on the 3rd line with Charlie Coyle. So he doesn't have to play with Krejci, and he doesn't have to play with Bergeron. So they got that perfection line, and Krejci then on the first power play, and everybody back. I mean, everybody, maybe I think Russ was the only one miscalculated on Boston. I thought they were dead in the water. I think they were too old, and they've just come back, and they're getting production from everywhere. Now, can that last? I'll say the real, not real plus, but real. But I don't know. I want to do this probably 2-3 quarters of the way in the season and see where they are then.
Yeah, well, then it's easy. It's easy. Right now, it's not.
I want things easy.
Right now, it's not, because we don't know where they're going to be. I think they're stealing it. I do. I listen. They have one of the most dynamic power plays I've ever seen. Like, their power play is just incredible. And there's certain things that they do that are phenomenal. But I think that they're riding an emotion of not having Cassidy there anymore, and having Krejci back, and having the whole thing going on. And I just think that emotion is going to burn out. And I'm not saying they're not. I mean, obviously they're going to make the playoffs. They're in a spot where they're never going to not make the playoffs right now. But I just think that I wouldn't be shocked if they were out the first round type thing. So we'll see. I mean, anything can play out, but that's one of my things. Finally, the last thing I'll say for you guys is this, and this is not a for real steals or Fields question, but just a question that I think is a really interesting topic that I just wanted to bring up because someone brought it to me yesterday and had a long debate about it. But we don't have to have a long debate. Who's had a better career, Taylor Hall or Tyler Seguin?
Well, I mean, Hall's got an MVP.
Yeah,
Seguin's got a Stanley Cup.
Yeah. What do you think, Kev?
That's a tough one.
I would say Seguin.
It's a tough one, isn't it?
I would say Seguin, because Seguin has had big seasons. His problems have been injury related, whereas Hall had injuries early in his career, but lately, especially, like, he went and won an MVP with New Jersey, and he went to Arizona, had a little bit of success there. His tenure in Buffalo was an unmitigated disaster.
Right.
And it's taken him a year to sort of get in line in Boston. There's been ups and downs. The ups and downs of Seguin have been mostly injury related. So if it was me, I would say Seguin.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Mike on this. And, it just feels we've been more disappointed with Hall than we have with Seguin. Like, I think we thought Hall was going to be a much better player, but the expectations just have been so high for him. Maybe it's unfair, but I feel Seguin has sort of lived up to his when he's been healthy, he's played well. So,
although it feels like it was a horse race, they're coming around the quarter. Sagan's ahead by like 3 lengths, but Hall's catching up. Because it feels like that that this is like.
Yeah, I don't. It may be just a half a nose. Like they both have had their moments.
Seguin struggled last year after coming back from the injury. He's having a really good year this year, just like Hall is. So, I mean, I think they're up there right now at the same speed, and I think he's a little ahead of Hall.
But don't you think people have been harder on Hall than they've been on Seguin in certain situations?
Yes.
And considering what Seguin has been like the highest paid player in the league at points.
But he's the number one pick. He was the number one pick.
Number one pick, but I mean, he hasn't played at the high as one of the top 5 players. many years. So if you think about like where he's had really good years, but he's been the number one player, highest player for a while.
But where Mike just said, and this is I think what happens with Sagan. Like he said, he had a bad year, but his numbers last year were, he had numbers last year. Sagan did.
Yeah,
so,
they did. I guess And so I don't know. I don't know the answer to this. I guess it's an interesting way. I don't know if I would say. To me, it's Sagan has the slight lead, but it's not over. And I feel like Hall has a lot. I feel like Hall has more in him left than Sagan has.
Now let me ask this. This is a hard question. But sometimes I felt that Ben held Sagan back.
Okay.
That Ben was his struggles made it more difficult for Sagan.
Amplified. I think it amplified over the last couple of years. Sagan's struggles, if there were any. I agree with you.
And now they're playing separately. Now Ben is playing with Delandria and with Wyatt Johnson, and he's having. I mean, I did not expect Jamie Benn to bounce back like he has this year. He's got new life and he's playing really well. And Sagan is playing. I think he's playing with Gurrianov, and I can't remember the other line, but he's playing well separately from Ben. So I think maybe the speed.
That's a really good point, though.
Speed with Ben was the problem.
Really good point, Kev, because you do think of Ben and Sagan, they're almost one word, on that team. And so when you think about who's playing well, you think, oh, they're not playing well because Ben's not playing well.
Well, twice in their career they've been called out for not playing well. So.
Right. They have been by their owner, right? They've been called out.
Right.
And then
that's what happens when you're making $9.5 million. So
that's true. Well, we'll see as close, but that's all the time we have for today, folks. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And again, we appreciate you guys sharing the word about the Hockey Buzzcast out there on the internet. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. There's lots of games going on. We will talk to you soon. Enjoy your day. Enjoy your Tuesday.